I killed the wrong people. And that's why I was hiding in the waste ducts of a Krell prison station when I heard her choking. Not choking like someone swallowed wrong. Choking like drowning on dry land. The kind of sound that makes your spine go cold because you've heard it before, in field hospitals and burning ships, and you know exactly how long someone has before the lights go out. 20 seconds, maybe 30 if they're lucky. She had less. I should have kept crawling. I was 3 hours into a 40-hour window to reach the loading docks, steal a supply runner, and disappear into the fringe before the Krell realized one of their maximum security prisoners had walked out through the plumbing. I had no weapons, no backup, and no margin for error. Stopping meant dying. That was the math. But I stopped anyway. The math never worked for me. I dropped through the vent into a detention cell that smelled like recycled fear and antiseptic. The prisoner was on the floor, clawing at her throat, and I knew immediately she wasn't Krell. Wrong proportions. The Krell are tall, sure, but they're built like loading cranes. All sharp angles and condescension. This one was taller, impossibly slender, with skin that looked like someone had poured starlight into a mold. Vryn. I'd only seen them twice before, both times at a distance, both times looking down at the rest of us from their council seats. They didn't breathe the same air we did. That was the problem. Her filtration implant had failed. I could see it. A small silver disc embedded in her collarbone, cracked and leaking some kind of pale fluid. Without it, our atmosphere was killing her. I'd read about this in a tactical brief once, back when I still got briefings instead of court-martials. Vryn physiology couldn't process nitrogen-oxygen mix. To them, our air was like drowning in acid. She looked at me with eyes that had 3 colors I couldn't name, and I saw the exact moment she decided she was dead. I didn't think. I pulled the emergency seal from my stolen maintenance suit, the one that's supposed to keep you alive if you puncture your gear in a vacuum. I ripped open the chemical pack inside, crushed the catalyst tab, and shoved the whole thing against the broken implant. The foam expanded, fast and hot, sealing the crack. It wouldn't last long, maybe an hour, but it would buy her time. She sucked in a breath that sounded like breaking glass, and I realized I'd just made the second worst decision of my life. The worst one was on Tanis 4, 8 months ago, when I refused an order and got 23 people killed. 23 soldiers who trusted me. 23 names I said every morning, like a prayer I didn't believe in anymore. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, and I nearly punched her on reflex before I saw her face. Not angry, not scared. Something else. Something that looked like it hurt. Why? The translator implant behind her ear crackled with interference, making her voice sound fractured. You are human. You are nothing. Yeah, that tracked. The Vryn saw humanity the way humans used to see livestock. Useful, occasionally amusing, ultimately disposable. We'd been members of the Galactic Assembly for 30 years, and they still acted like we'd wandered in from the servants' entrance. You're welcome, I said, pulling my wrist free. My voice came out harder than I meant. Don't mention it. Seriously. Don't. I'm not supposed to be here. I turned to climb back into the duct, but she moved faster than anything that tall should move, blocking my path. Up close, I could see the scars on her hands, the kind you get from fighting, not from sitting in council chambers making smug pronouncements about lesser species. I owe you a life debt, she said, and the translator turned her words cold and formal. I am Thyra of House Velkar. By the third accord, I am bound to you until the debt is paid in equal measure. Great. Wonderful. File the paperwork later. I need to... You do not understand. She grabbed my arm again, and this time I felt how much she was shaking. I swear it on my name and blood. I will repay this debt. Forever, if I must. The way she said forever made it sound like a threat, and a promise, and a confession all at once. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something that didn't fit the briefings. Vryn didn't get desperate. They didn't shake. They certainly didn't end up in Krell prison cells with broken filtration implants. And they definitely didn't swear eternal debts to human fugitives. They'd just called nothing. "What did you do?" I asked. Her three-colored eyes went dark. I told the truth when a lie would have been wiser. Yeah, I knew that feeling. "Look," I said, "I don't have time for—" The alarm cut me off. Not the general alarm. The specific one. The kind that means someone important just noticed something very wrong. Somewhere in the station's security core, a guard had just realized that cell block 7 was 2 prisoners short instead of 1. Thyra's head snapped toward the sound, and I saw her do the same math I'd done 100 times on 100 battlefields. Distance, time, probability. All the numbers that tell you you're about to die. "They will kill us both," she said quietly. "Probably," I agreed, already calculating routes. The main plan was dead. The ducts would be flooded with security drones in minutes. That left the hard way. Through the station's industrial sector, past 3 checkpoints, and into the cargo bay, where I'd hidden my exit strategy inside a shipping container marked "Medical Waste. Incinerate on arrival." "Can you run?" I asked. She straightened, and I saw pride war with pragmatism on her face. Pride won, barely. "I am Vryn. We do not run from—" "That's a no." I grabbed her arm, felt how light she was despite the height, and started moving. "New plan. You're going to run anyway, or we both die here, and your eternal debt dies with you. Your choice." She ran. We made it 4 corridors before I realized she wasn't just running. She was limping. Something was wrong with her left leg, an old injury the Krell hadn't bothered to fix properly. Of course they hadn't. Why waste medical resources on a political prisoner who'd probably just be quietly executed once the paperwork cleared? The first checkpoint appeared ahead. 2 Krell guards with neural disruptors and the kind of board competence that makes them dangerous. I pulled Thyra into a maintenance alcove, felt her breathing hard against my shoulder, each breath a reminder that my foam patch was temporary and she was on borrowed time. "Stay here," I whispered. "You cannot." "Shut up and let me work." I stepped out, hands raised, posture defeated. The guards saw a human, and their disruptors stayed lowered. Humans weren't threats. Humans were the species that cleaned the toilets and fixed the wiring, and occasionally got uppity enough to require a quick neural scramble to remind them of their place. "Lost?" one of them asked in their clicking language. Their translator was better than Thyra's, all smugness and condescension. "Yeah," I said, slurring my words like I was drunk or drugged. "Looking for the sanitation hub. Someone said it was. Down here?" They relaxed. This was a story they understood. Stupid human, wrong place, probably high on something cheap. One of them waved dismissively toward the corridor we'd just come from. "Back that way. 15 levels down. Try not to get lost again or we'll—" I was already moving. Grabbed the disruptor from the first guard's holster, used it as a club against his head, before he could process the impossible thing that was happening. The second guard was faster, got his weapon up and charging, but I was inside his reach before the capacitor could wind to full power. Drove my elbow into the nerve cluster at the base of his skull, felt the sickening crunch that meant I'd hit too hard. Both guards down in 4 seconds. I took their disruptors, their access cards, and the protein bars from one guard's pocket, because I hadn't eaten in 18 hours, and spite is a powerful motivator. Thyra emerged from the alcove, staring at the unconscious guards like she'd just watched physics reverse itself. "You are not just a fugitive," she said slowly. "No," I admitted, checking the charge on the stolen disruptors. "I'm a war criminal. Or a war hero, depending on who you ask. Mostly criminal these days." "What did you do?" The question hung in the air between us, and I could have lied. Should have lied. But something about the way she'd said, "I told the truth when a lie would have been wiser," made me match her honesty with my own. "I refused to bomb a civilian target," I said. "My CO said it was strategically necessary. I said it was murder. We had a disagreement. He pulled rank. I pulled a sidearm. Then I stole a gunship and evacuated as many civilians as I could before the bombs fell anyway. I met her 3 colored eyes. I saved 417 people that day, but 23 of my own soldiers died in the bombardment because I wasn't there to lead them out. So tell me, am I a criminal or a hero?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her reprocessing everything she thought she knew about humans, about me. "You are both," she said finally. "And neither. You are simply someone who chose." "Yeah, well, my choices tend to get people killed. Mine as well." We stared at each other, 2 prisoners who'd made the wrong kind of choices, and I felt something shift. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. The kind you only get from someone who understands the weight of decisions that can never be unmade. The alarm changed pitch, got louder, more urgent. They'd found the guards. "Come on," I said. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before this whole station locks down." We ran. Through maintenance corridors that stank of industrial lubricant and desperation. Past automated systems that didn't care about escaping prisoners because they only cared about keeping the recyclers running and the artificial gravity stable. Thyra kept pace despite her limp, despite each breath coming harder as the foam patch degraded and our atmosphere slowly poisoned her. Checkpoint 2 was empty. Someone had pulled the guards to deal with the alarm, and we slipped through on a stolen access card that still smelled like the guards' last meal. Checkpoint 3 was not empty. 5 guards, all armed, all alert. They'd been briefed. They knew something was wrong, and they were ready for it. There was no talking our way through this one, no clever tricks or misdirection, just math, and the math said we were dead. I felt Thyra tense beside me, felt her prepare for the ending she'd probably been expecting since her implant failed. She'd die here, in a Krell prison station, choking on atmosphere her body couldn't process, and her life debt would die unpaid. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Your kindness deserved a better ending." It's not over yet. I was lying. We both knew it. But I'd learned a long time ago that the difference between giving up and going down fighting is the same difference between being forgotten and being remembered. I'd already chosen which one I wanted to be. I raised both disruptors, and Thyra straightened beside me, and together we stepped into the corridor to face the math that said we couldn't win. The first guard died before he could shout a warning. The second managed to get off a shot that seared past my ear and left the air smelling like ozone and burnt hair. The third had better aim, and I felt the neural disruptor's edge catch my shoulder, sending lightning through my nervous system and making my right arm go dead. I switched the disruptor to my left hand, fired blind through the pain, and got lucky. The shot caught the third guard in the chest, and he went down hard. The fourth and fifth guards had cover now, shooting from behind a bulkhead, and I knew we were done. I couldn't shoot left-handed worth a damn. My right arm was useless weight, and Thyra was unarmed and dying by degrees. Then Thyra moved. She was fast before. Now she was something else. She crossed the corridor in 3 strides that should have been impossible with her injured leg, and I realized she'd been hiding exactly how hurt she was. Hiding exactly how much she could still do when it mattered. She grabbed the fourth guard's disruptor, twisted it out of his grip with a move that looked like dance and violence had a child, and used the weapon like a club with the same casual brutality I'd shown at the first checkpoint. The guard went down, and she turned on the fifth with that same impossible speed, but she was too slow. too hurt, too busy dying. The fifth guard's shot took her in the chest, and I watched her fall in slow motion, watched three colored eyes go wide with something that looked like surprise and relief all mixed together, and I felt something in me snap. I don't remember crossing the corridor. Don't remember bringing the disruptor down on the guard's head hard enough to crack the casing. Don't remember the sound he made when he hit the deck. I just remember kneeling next to Thyra, seeing the burn across her chest, and knowing she had minutes, maybe less. "Guess we're even," she said, and coughed something that looked too bright to be blood. "Life for a life. Debt. Paid." "No," I said. "No, that's not how this works." I pulled her up, got her arm across my shoulders, and started dragging her toward the cargo bay. My right arm was starting to wake up, all pins and needles and screaming nerve endings, but I made it work anyway. Made everything work because the alternative was leaving her to die, and I'd already left 23 people to die once. I wasn't doing it again. The cargo bay was chaos. Alarms, flashing lights, security drones swarming like angry insects. My shipping container was there, exactly where I'd left it, and I got Thyra inside before anyone could stop us. Sealed the door, activated the emergency beacon I'd rigged to make it look like a medical emergency. In 3 minutes, the container would be loaded onto an automated hauler heading for the nearest disposal station. In 6 hours, we'd be far enough from the Krell prison to risk popping the lid and stealing a real ship, if Thyra lived that long. She was pale now, her starlight skin turning gray, and the foam patch was failing completely. I could see the implant underneath, cracked beyond any field repair. "Listen to me," I said, pulling every emergency supply from my hidden stash. "You're not dying here. You're not dying at all. I didn't save you just to watch you bleed out in a shipping container." "Why?" she asked, and her voice was so quiet I barely heard it over the container's life support kicking in. "Why do you care? I am Vryn. We enslaved your people, looked down on you for centuries. I am everything you should hate." I looked at her, really looked, and saw past the pride and the scars and the dying. Saw someone who'd told the truth when a lie would have been wiser. Someone who'd sworn a debt she meant to keep. Someone who'd fought beside me when she could have just accepted the easy death. "Because you grabbed my wrist and called it a debt instead of dismissing it as charity," I said. "Because you ran when I needed you to run. Because you fought when I needed you to fight. Because you're here, and you're real. And I'm tired of watching people die for my choices." I pulled out the last thing in my stash. A Vryn filtration implant, military grade, still in its sealed case. I'd stolen it 3 months ago from a supply depot, thinking I could sell it for enough credits to disappear into the fringe forever. "This is going to hurt," I warned her. "Everything hurts," she said, and almost smiled. I installed the implant with shaking hands, and the kind of field surgery brutality that would have gotten me dishonorably discharged if I hadn't already been dishonorably discharged. She screamed once, bit it back, and went silent while I worked. When it was done, when the implant sealed and activated and started filtering the air her body could actually use, she drew a breath that sounded like life instead of death. She looked at me with those 3 colored eyes, and I saw something in them I'd never seen in a Vryn before. Respect. "I swore a life debt," she said quietly. "I meant it. Forever, if I must. I will repay this human. I swear it on my name and blood and everything I am." "My name's Marcus," I said. "If we're going to be stuck together, you should probably use it." "Marcus." She tested the word, made it sound almost elegant. "I am Thyra, and I promise you I will pay this debt in a way no one could imagine." The container lurched as the automated systems grabbed it, started hauling it toward the loading dock. In hours, we'd be free. In days, we'd be hunted. In weeks, maybe we'd be dead. But right now, in this moment, We were alive. Both of us. Against all math and probability and common sense. I leaned back against the container wall, felt exhaustion crash over me like a wave, and closed my eyes. "I'll hold you to that," I said. And in the darkness behind my eyelids, I didn't see 23 faces for the first time in 8 months. I just saw 3 colored eyes and heard a promise that sounded like an oath. Forever, if she must. I believed her. The disposal station turned out to be exactly as advertised. A floating graveyard of broken ships, failed dreams, and industrial waste that nobody wanted to think about too hard. We popped the container 6 hours after launch, stole a maintenance shuttle that had maybe 3 jumps left in its failing drive core, and made it to the fringe before anyone realized the medical waste had grown legs. For 2 weeks, we were ghosts. Thyra taught me how to move through shadow markets without getting knifed, and I taught her how to hotwire human tech with nothing but spite and determination. We slept in shifts, ate nutrient paste that tasted like regret, and didn't talk about the fact that we were both running from things we couldn't outrun. The 3rd week, she started teaching me to fight properly. "You brawl," she said, watching me practice strikes against the shuttle's bulkhead. "Effectively, yes, but without elegance, without understanding. Elegance doesn't stop a disruptor round. Neither does brute force." She moved behind me, adjusted my stance with hands that were gentle despite the scars. "Your people fight like you are always desperate, always cornered. It makes you dangerous, but it also makes you predictable." "Yeah, well, we usually are cornered." She was quiet for a moment, and I felt her hands stop moving. "I know. I have seen the reports, read the histories. Your species has been fighting for survival since before you left your homeworld. It shapes everything you are. And your species has been on top for so long you forgot what it's like to be desperate," I said, turning to face her. "That shape you any differently?" Her 3 colored eyes went dark. Yes, it made us cruel without meaning to be, made us dismiss suffering we didn't understand. Made us. She stopped, jaw tight. Made us like the people who imprisoned me. I'd been waiting for her to tell me. 2 weeks of running together, sleeping in the same cramped shuttle, and she hadn't once explained why a Vryn of House Velkar ended up in a Krell prison with a sabotaged implant. "What truth did you tell?" I asked. She sat down on the deck, movements careful like she was testing the weight of her own honesty. "The Vryn Council votes on all matters of galactic import. Trade routes, resource allocation, military intervention. 3 cycles ago, there was a vote to allow human colonies in the outer reaches. I remember. The Council voted yes, biggest expansion of human territory in a generation. The Council voted yes," she agreed, "but the vote was purchased. Krell interests paid bribes to half the Council members to ensure human expansion would push into contested space, triggering conflict with the Salvic Confederacy." She met my eyes. "I discovered the evidence, brought it before the Council, demanded investigation. And they imprisoned you for it. Not the Council. They simply stripped my title, my house name, my voting rights. They made me nothing." Her voice went flat, cold. "The Krell imprisoned me because I knew too much about their operations. The broken implant was not accident. It was meant to look like equipment failure during my transfer. No evidence, no questions, just another prisoner who died from neglect." I processed that, felt all the implications settle into place, like pieces of a weapon I just field-stripped and reassembled. The human expansion. The one that got 300,000 colonists killed in the Salvic War. That was engineered, purchased. A business transaction. Yes, and you tried to stop it. I failed. I thought about Tanis Afor, about 417 civilians saved and 23 soldiers dead because I'd made a choice. About how the math never balanced, how it never would. About how sometimes the right choice still got people killed. You didn't fail, I said quietly. You told the truth. That's not failure, that's just expensive. She looked at me with something that might have been gratitude or might have been grief, and I realized we weren't that different. Both of us had chosen truth over survival. Both of us had paid for it in ways that couldn't be undone. Both of us were still paying. Teach me, I said, standing. If we're going to survive whatever comes next, I need to stop fighting like I'm cornered. You are cornered, she said, but she stood anyway. We both are, but perhaps we can choose how we face the corner. She moved like water, and I moved like stone, and somewhere in between we found something that worked. She showed me how to use an opponent's momentum against them, how to end fights in 3 moves instead of 10, how to make stillness look like threat. I showed her how to fight dirty, how to exploit human technology's quirks, how to make desperation into a weapon instead of a weakness. After a week of training, I could almost keep up with her. After 2 weeks, she stopped pulling her strikes. After 3 weeks, I realized she was teaching me more than combat. You hesitate, she said during a sparring session that had left us both bruised and breathing hard. Every time you gain advantage, every time you could finish, you hesitate. I don't. You do. She sat against the bulkhead, wiping blood from a split lip I'd given her. You fight well, Marcus, better than most humans I've trained with. But when the moment comes to end it, you stop. You think. You calculate cost. She pointed at me with fingers that had 3 scars I'd put there during practice. That is what got your soldiers killed. The words hit harder than any strike she'd thrown. I felt them land in my chest, settle into the place where 23 names lived, and I wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that thinking before killing wasn't weakness, it was humanity. But she was right. On Tanis IV, I'd hesitated, calculated, weighed the cost of following orders against the cost of refusing. And while I was calculating, the bombardment started. While I was choosing, 23 people who trusted me died because I wasn't there. I'm not a killer, I said. No, you are something worse. You are a killer who thinks killing should mean something. She stood, moved close enough that I could see all 3 colors in her eyes. That is not weakness, Marcus. That is the thing that separates humans from us. The thing we lost centuries ago. What thing? The belief that every death matters, that every choice has weight. She put her hand on my chest, over my heart, and I felt the scars on her palm. We Vrin measure worth by efficiency, by logic. By results, you measure it by cost, by conscience, by impossible mathematics that can never balance. That sounds like a pretty good way to get killed. It is. She almost smiled. It is also the only reason I am still alive. I looked at her, really looked, and saw what she wasn't saying, that a Vrin who calculated by efficiency would have let her die in that cell. Would have saved the implant for selling, saved the time for escaping, saved the effort for something that mattered. But I'd hesitated, calculated, decided that her life was worth more than my escape. And now we were both here, alive, because I'd chosen wrong by every logical measure. The debt, I said slowly. You keep talking about repaying it. But you've already taught me more in 3 weeks than I learned in 3 years of military training. Doesn't that count? No. She pulled her hand back, and I saw something in her face I couldn't read. What I teach you now is practical, necessary. It helps us both survive. Her voice dropped, went quiet in a way that made my spine straighten. The debt I owe is not practical. It is not logical. It is the kind that reshapes who you are. I don't understand. You will. She turned away, started wrapping her hands for another round of sparring. When the time comes, Marcus, you will understand exactly how I intend to pay. The 4th week, we ran out of fuel. The 5th week, we ran out of food. The 6th week, we ran out of places to hide. The bounty on my head had grown from substantial to obscene, and someone had added Thyra's name to the list with a reward that would buy a small moon. Apparently, the Krell didn't appreciate escaped prisoners, and the Vryn Council didn't appreciate stripped nobles who kept existing when they were supposed to quietly disappear. We were worth more dead than most people made alive. "We need help," I said, staring at the star charts and seeing nothing but hostile territory in every direction. "Someone with resources, someone who owes us a favor." "You have such a person?" "Maybe." I pulled up a comm frequency I hadn't used in 8 months, one I'd sworn I'd never use again. "There's a human admiral, stationed in the Reach. She tried to help me after Tanis Afo, argued for clemency, said I'd made an impossible choice. I told her to go to hell. Will she still help? I don't know, but she's the only person I can think of who might give us a chance instead of a firing squad." I sent the message into the dark, encrypted with codes that were probably compromised by now, and waited. 2 days of silence. 3. On the 4th day, the answer came back. "Coordinates received. Come alone. If this is a trap, Marcus, I will personally ensure your court-martial is ugly." "She sounds warm," Thyra observed. "She sounds smart," I said, punching in the coordinates. "Smart people don't trust war criminals." The rendezvous point was a human listening post in neutral space, barely more than a sensor array with a docking ring. Admiral Chen was waiting when we arrived, flanked by 2 Marines with itchy trigger fingers and expressions that said they'd be happy for an excuse to use them. Chen herself looked exactly like I remembered. Sharp-eyed, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen every lie in the galaxy and stopped being impressed by them decades ago. "Marcus," she said, voice flat, "I was hoping you were dead. Sorry to disappoint. You brought a friend." She looked at Thyra, and I saw her expression shift through surprise, recognition, and something that might have been concern. "Thyra of House Velkar, or should I say former House Velkar. I read the reports. Didn't realize you'd traded prison cells for running with wanted fugitives." "Circumstances change," Thyra said quietly. "They do." Chen turned back to me, and I saw her weighing options, calculating costs, doing the same math I'd done on Tanis 4. "You sent me coordinates, Marcus. That implies you want something. Fuel, food, a chance to disappear into the fringe without a kill team on our tail. That's a lot to ask from someone you told to go to hell. I know." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her thinking. Finally, she sighed. "I can give you fuel and food, the rest." She shook her head. "The bounty on you is too high now. Every mercenary crew and Krell warship in 3 sectors is looking for you, and the Vryn Council wants Thyra dead badly enough that they've put a secondary bounty on anyone who helps her." "So that's it?" I felt anger rise, hot and useless. "You bring us here just to tell us we're fucked?" "No." Chen met my eyes, and I saw something in her face that made me stop. "I brought you here to give you a choice. There's a human research station in the Tarakan Nebula, off the books, running experiments the Assembly wouldn't approve if they knew. They need security, and they don't ask questions about who provides it. You want me to work for a black site. I want you to live long enough to maybe, someday, do something that matters. Because despite everything, Marcus, I still think you're worth saving." She pulled out a data chip, held it between 2 fingers. "This has everything you need: station coordinates, security clearances, payment schedules. It's not glamorous, but it's survival." I stared at the chip, felt the weight of choice settle on my shoulders again. Running to a black site meant giving up on clearing my name, meant accepting that I'd always be the criminal who refused orders and got people killed. But it also meant living, meant Thyra living. I reached for the chip. Thyra's hand caught my wrist, gentle but firm. "Marcus, before you decide, there is something you should know." She turned to Chen, and I saw her straighten, saw something shift in her posture that made her look taller, more dangerous. "Admiral, tell me, what do you know of the Vrin military research programs?" Chen's face went carefully neutral. "Classified information. I worked in those programs, before I discovered the bribes, before I told the truth." Thyra's voice went cold, clinical. "The Vrin Council has been developing biological weapons designed specifically to target human physiology. The research station in the Tarakan Nebula is not running experiments the Assembly wouldn't approve. It is running Vrin Council experiments on human test subjects, paid for by the same bribes that started the Salvic War. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes violence." Chen's hand moved toward her sidearm, and I felt the two Marines behind her tense. "That's a serious accusation." "It is the truth." Thyra didn't move, didn't flinch. "The chip Admiral Chen offered you contains embedded tracking code. If you accept it, if you go to that station, you will not be providing security. You will be providing test data, both of you." I looked at Chen, saw her face, and knew Thyra was right. Saw the moment Chen realized we knew. Saw her calculate whether to kill us or let us run. Saw her decide. She drew her sidearm. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she said, and almost sounded like she meant it. "You were worth saving. But you're worth more as data." The math never worked for me. It wasn't working now. But Thyra moved before Chen could fire, faster than I'd seen her move in all our sparring, and suddenly we were fighting for our lives in a listening post that was barely big enough for the violence we brought to it. Thyra took the first Marine with a strike I'd taught her, the one that used human bone structure against itself. He went down hard, disruptor clattering from his grip. The second Marine got a shot off, and I felt it graze my ribs, hot and sharp, but I was already moving. Used his own momentum to slam him into the bulkhead, heard his helmet crack against metal, and he dropped. Chen fired. The shot took Thyra in the shoulder, spun her around, and I saw her three-colored eyes go wide, not with pain, with calculation, with the same cold math that had kept her alive through imprisonment and betrayal, and 6 weeks running through a galaxy that wanted her dead. She looked at me, and I saw her decide. "Marcus," she said quietly, "the debt. I told you I would pay it in a way no one could imagine. Don't—" But she was already moving. Grabbed Chen's wrist, twisted the sidearm away, and put herself between me and the Admiral's second shot. Took the round in the chest, the same place she'd been shot escaping the prison, and I watched her fall for the second time in 8 weeks. This time, she was smiling. "Thyra!" I caught her before she hit the deck, felt the weight of her in my arms, and saw the blood spreading across her chest. Too much blood. Too fast. "Listen," she said, and her voice was already fading. "Chen knows about the experiments. She's complicit. If you take her alive, she can testify, can expose everything. I don't care about that. I care about you not dying." "I know." Her hand found mine, squeezed weakly. "That is why this is the only way to repay the debt. You saved me when logic said not to, when math said I was worthless. You chose conscience over survival." She coughed, bright blood on her lips. "Now I choose the same. I die so you can expose the truth, so 400,000 humans don't become test subjects, so your species survives what mine tried to do to it. That's not—" My voice broke. "That's not worth dying for. You died for 23 names on Tanis 4. You killed your career, your honor, your future, because you chose conscience over orders." She pulled my hand to her chest, where I could feel her 3 hearts slowing. I die for 300 million names, for every human who would have suffered in those experiments. That is mathematics even I can accept. Thyra, please. I told you I would pay the debt. Her eyes were dimming, all 3 colors fading to something that looked like peace. I told you it would be in a way no one could imagine. A Vryn dying to save humans. That is unimaginable. That is the debt paid in full. She stopped breathing, and I felt something in me break that had nothing to do with ribs or bullets or physical pain. I looked at Chen, saw her staring at Thyra's body with an expression I couldn't read, and felt rage rise in me like a tide. She was right, Chen said quietly. The experiments, the tracking, all of it. But I had my orders, Marcus. I was trying to save humanity by understanding how to counter Vryn weapons. Thyra didn't understand that. She saw it as murder, but it was protection. You can tell that to the tribunal, I said, pulling Chen's own restraints from her belt. Because you're going to testify. You're going to tell them everything. Every experiment. Every test subject. Every order you followed because you decided the math made sense. They'll execute me. Good. I secured the restraints, felt no satisfaction in it. Maybe they'll name a memorial after you. Put it right next to the one for the test subjects you killed. I took Chen's ship, transmitted the coordinates of the research station to every human military frequency I could find, and made sure the Admiral's testimony was recorded and encrypted before anyone could silence her. In 3 days, the Assembly would know. In a week, the Vryn Council would fall. In a month, maybe humanity would finally be seen as something other than useful livestock. But none of that mattered as much as the body I wrapped in emergency blankets and laid in the cargo hold with the kind of care reserved for soldiers who died for something bigger than themselves. Thyra had saved my life twice, once in a prison and once in a listening post. The first time by accepting my help, the second time by refusing to let me throw my life away for hers. I'd started this running from 23 names I couldn't save. I ended it carrying 1 name I couldn't forget. Forever if she must, she'd said. She kept her promise. The debt was paid in blood and sacrifice, and the kind of mathematics that only made sense when you measured worth by conscience instead of survival. I didn't know if that made her a criminal or a hero. But I knew it made her human in all the ways that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 6 months later, I stood in front of the Galactic Assembly, no longer a fugitive, no longer a criminal. Thyra's testimony from the listening post had exposed the experiments, toppled the Vryn Council, and given humanity a seat at the table that came with respect instead of contempt. They offered me a pardon, offered me my rank back, my career, my future. I refused. Some debts can't be repaid by going back to what you were. Some debts demand you become something new. So I took command of a memorial station in the fringe, the kind that helps refugees and fugitives and people running from choices they can't unmake. Named it after a Vryn who died saving humans when her own people would have called that insanity. Named it after someone who understood that the math never works, but you choose anyway. Named it Thyra, and every morning I say 24 names like a prayer I'm starting to believe in again. 23 soldiers who died because I chose conscience, and 1 Vryn who died because she learned to do the same. The math still doesn't balance, but maybe it's not supposed to.